Hi there. Thanks for taking the time to watch this Astranti theory revision video. I'm Molly, I'm one of the tutors here at Astranti, and you'll just be hearing from me briefly as I introduce the topic today, which, as you can see on screen, is levels of culture. Now, this is something that will be particularly important to you if you happen to be studying your E2 exams or perhaps your MCS exams. And we're going to go into a bit more detail about that with our expert, Anthony, in just a few moments. So, without further ado, let's find out everything you'll need to know about levels of culture.
So there's a famous saying, Rome wasn't built in a day, and just like Rome, the culture of an organisation isn't going to be constructed overnight. So what we're going to ask ourselves in this question is, what kind of things are these cultures built on? And why may two organisations of a similar size working in the same industry have such different cultures? Well, we're going to look at a theory to help us answer those questions, and it was created by Professor Edgar Schein, who suggested there were direct mechanisms that had an effect on the organization's culture. And Schein divided his mechanisms into three different and distinct levels. Artifacts, as you can see on screen, espouse values, and basic assumptions. So let's begin with the first of our direct mechanisms that affect organizational culture, which is artifacts. Now, artifacts are the visual representations of an organization. So what do we mean when we talk about visual representations of an organization? Well, the logos, the architecture of the buildings, the uniforms or the dress code, and the symbols used by that organization. These artifacts are easily viewed. They're easily heard and felt by anyone connected with the organization. So, for example, a workplace that has a strict dress code in place may feel more professional work environment, and then the staff may buy into that and then take their work more seriously. Okay, so that's artifacts. Let's scroll down to espouse values now. Now, these involve the values, the standards, and rules of conduct within the organization. And so this is how the people in the organization express themselves to those inside as well as outside it. Now, this communication or this expression often takes the form of policies and statements. So a really good example of this would be the company's philosophy. So let's imagine, for example, we've got a company that's got a philosophy which is to be the best no matter what the cost. Then it would most likely end up with some employees acting unethically because they're interpreting that philosophy to mean do whatever it takes. So they might bend the rules or cut corners. But if the philosophy of the organization was to do what is best for everyone, then those espoused values may mean the employees would go out of their way to act with integrity. Okay, and the third of our direct mechanisms are our basic assumptions. Now, these basic assumptions are the deep-rooted behaviors and beliefs. Now, these are often unconscious, and these make up the essence of the organization's culture. Now, these can be related to the organization, or it can just be as a result of human nature. So, for example, sorry, I brought basic assumptions up on screen. Now I have, for example, some organizations may be run with an aggressive, dictatorial management style, but other organizations can be run in a relaxed, easy-going style. Now, either of these styles may never have been specified in a statement of values. It's just the way things are done. And we're going right back to handy in our first section now. Perhaps maybe because of the approach of the founder, or perhaps the style lends itself more to the type of industry that the company is in. Okay, so there we go. There's Edgar Schein's three different levels. And this model, as you may be able to guess from looking at it, is often displayed and referred to as an onion model. Because the reason is that when it comes to changing and altering culture within an organization, the top level, the artifact level, can easily be changed overnight. simply change the logo or change the uniforms. However, that doesn't mean just by changing the outer level that the company is going to change the more deeply rooted cultural values and assumptions below. And keeping with the metaphor of an onion, as you go down through this level, it's harder and harder to change these cultural levels, just like it's harder and harder to peel an onion as you go down through it. So, for example, how does a company actually change its underlying belief that's traditionally always been present within the organization? It probably won't, especially not in the short term, because this would be a really big change. And so it's going to take firm and effective management and perpetual supervision over time to make sure the change sticks. So we've got our basic idea of this onion model now, of Edgar Schein's theory. So what we're going to look at is it in action with a real world example. And we're going to use Starbucks to help explain this model and to make sure you understand this model before we move on. So, for example, with Starbucks, the artifacts are the famous green mermaid logo. Now, it's unlikely that Starbucks are going to change this because of how iconic it is, but they could easily change it if they wanted to, or they could make slight alterations to it if they wanted to modernize all those kind of things. The next level is, of course, the espoused values. Now, this is the kind of values that the company lives by. This is going to have an impact on how the employees conduct themselves, as we saw when we looked at this the first time round, as well as how the public, or what the public, expect for them. Now, Starbucks have expressed these values in the 5 principles and tenets. You can see them on screen. The first is make it your own way, and this is Starbucks seeking to integrate the creativity and personality of each member of staff into their overall customer experience. Staff are encouraged to embrace their individuality to achieve this. Number 2 of their 5 tenets is everything matters. Every small thing can have an impact on the customer experience. Staff are encouraged to pay attention to these small details. Number 3 is surprise and delight. Starbucks works on the basis that customers love to be pleasantly surprised. Now, an example of this is how red coffee cups have been introduced during Christmas. It's changing up. It's delighting their customers. Number 4 is embrace resistance. So staff are encouraged to value criticism and also differentiate between customers who have a problem and customers who routinely complain, so they can really understand what the problem is. And the 5th of their tenets is leave your mark. So Starbucks support having a positive impact on the local community and wider society, and encourage employees to engage in these activities. So what you can see here, hopefully with these tenets that we went through really quickly, is that Starbucks are trying to influence how people act at work. Now, the first one, make it your own way, relates to taking charge of your work in order to make things run as smoothly as possible. Now, the next 2 are all about giving your all to help the customer, making sure employees always strive to achieve more than the customers expect. Now, the 4th teaches the staff to embrace change and ideas, which is going to make it easier for the organization to change. And the final one teaches employees the values of taking chances and not being afraid to make their voices heard. Now, in short, these tenets detail the attitude Starbucks wants its employees to have towards work. So there we go. There's an example of espoused values. What we're going to move on to now is the last of our levels, which is basic assumptions. Now, these are the way the employees are working without even knowing it. So an example of this could be the way the baristas conduct themselves when they are at work. Now, there could be employees who have worked in the stores for decades and so become very accustomed to the way in which they work. So changing this assumption is going to be very, very difficult. Okay, so there we go. There's our 3 levels. Hopefully you can see they're going to get more difficult to change as you get deeper into the onion. There we go, our levels of culture.
Thanks for that, Anthony. And thank you for spending the last 10 minutes or so with us as we discuss levels of culture and Edgar Schein's model. They're going to be really helpful for exam day when you reach those E2 and MCS exams. Of course, if you've already started studying for those exams, you'll know full well there is much more to passing than just knowing this one model and about levels of culture. And as you can see, if I zoom out a little bit, we've actually got lots more to cover in this video. We've just shown you a little chunk of our culture and conflict video, which is an integral part of those syllabi. And as you can see, as we've only covered a little chunk of this video that we have on screen here, I'd like to talk to you briefly a bit more about what we can offer you to help with your studies. We have our comprehensive and thorough study texts, which are then translated into these easy to watch and entertaining videos. We have all of that information broken down into bite-sized and memorable chunks in our revision notes. And in order to really solidify your knowledge for exam day, we have hundreds of practice questions available. If you haven't already checked some of these out, you can pop over to our website, which is www.astranti.com, where you can find some free samples of what we do to get a better idea of how we can help you pass your exam. Once again, thank you very much for spending this time with us today. We'd really appreciate it if you could take a moment to like and subscribe to our channel. And thank you, and good luck with your studies.